We are on the record. The time on the video monitor is 10:37 a.m. This begins disc 2.
Now, I've placed here on the screen for you a copy of a document that has a number YCAA. Let me get rid of some of this stuff here. This is YCAA. (00943). Can you tell me what these are?
Could you scroll up?
Sure.
These appear. Can you go to the end?
Sure.
These appear to be draft minutes of the executive committee on October the 20th.
Looking here at page YCAA 000947, at the top of that it says October 20 Strategy Committee meeting and Executive Committee meeting. Craig briefed on the plan for Luxair.
Yes.
What was your brief on the plan for Luxair?
Can you scroll up? Okay. That information that you're looking at right there, plus a little bit on the page before.
Okay, we're looking at the 2 pages then are described as YCAA 000943 and YCAA 00944. That's the information that you gave to the board?
Yes. And there's probably another page there, but yes, you're in that area, yes.
Says option 1, we can continue to apply pressure to Luxair. What does that mean?
Well, let me read that whole sentence. It says we can continue to apply pressure to Luxair to meet their financial obligations through a combination of threats and incentives. Essentially what it means is we can continue to go on as we have been for the past year or so and try and get Luxair to pay their rent on time and to pay their fuel flowage fees and the way we have been, which is to, coax them and when necessary issue a letter of default.
And is that pretty much what you had been doing in the past with these guys?
Yes. We issued them, we had completed the documentation to issue, and I'm not exactly sure of the timing of each one, a notice of default in March. I think we got close again in April, and I think on the March one, it was signed and sealed, and we were walking out the door to deliver it when someone with a check walked in. And so we took the back due rent that they had included, we held off on the letter. We came close again in April. In June, we actually issued a notice of default. In August, we issued them a letter to give them the opportunity to get current on what they owed us. That did not happen. We did that again with a a final letter of default on September the 3rd or 4th, and they did not meet those obligations. And so at that point, the balance due was getting quite high. And I became concerned and went to the board for guidance.
So the last notice of default you gave them was this September 3rd or 4th notice that you're describing?
Yes.
That's a notice that you prepared, correct?
It is not exactly. It is a letter that my attorney prepared. He gave that to me, and then I put a bit of a preamble on it, personalized it as it were, but did not change the specifics that the attorney had put in.
That required rent to be paid by October 1, I believe, did it not?
It required, yes, it required an immediate payment of $20,000. And then I believe we said we will then give you until October 1 to then get current on everything else.
So, let's take a peek, I think, at this letter. What you're talking about here is CL 00001 in front of you, correct? And I put CL 00002 up here as well.
Yes. And
The-
can you scroll down?
Well, what more to scroll down? You want another page?
Yeah, it says page 2 of 3. That's
I
not,
put on CL 00003 as well.
okay, that's not the letter that this is an early draft of that letter. It might be the one that we sent out just before, but the one that I'm thinking about has all the signatures on the second page as well. But this appears to be the letter that we sent out.
So is CL 00001 and CL 00002 a copy of the letter that was sent out?
It appears to be.
Which part of this is your drafting and which part of this was done by your lawyer?
Well, the 4 conditions, I'm starting on page 2, the top paragraph down to my signature appears to be, that's the meat of what the attorney had prepared. I couldn't tell you without actually comparing on the page 1. It looks to me like also the second paragraph is very specific, is probably what the attorney wrote.
So you're talking about the second paragraph of page CL 00001 was written by your attorney, correct?
Yeah.
And everything on page CL 00002 was also written by the lawyer?
Yes.
So you wrote the first, third, and fourth paragraphs on CL 00001.
That's my guess at this time without actually comparing.
Comparing to what?
What the attorney actually gave me.
Oh, I see. Now, was in fact a payment made by the folks at Luxair during September of 2009?
Yes, it's my understanding they made the initial payment of $20,000.
Did they then make a payment on October 1?
No, they did not.
So, what did you do?
I sent Mr. Berger a email, and I said, Tim, I sent that, I believe, on the 3rd. 30 grand is due today. He responded and said, you know, I'll try and have some information for you next week.
Well, did you get any money from him?
No.
So what'd you do?
I don't have documentary evidence of whether or not I spoke to him again after that until the 19th.
What happened on the 19th?
Prior to the 19th, and I don't remember on what day, Luxair dropped the price of its fuel unexpectedly by 50 cents a gallon. That had never happened before, and so I became concerned and called Mr. Berger to ask him what was going on. My concern was that I knew that they had just taken a full delivery of fuel to top up their fuel tanks. I knew that they were in financial distress, and I was concerned that they were going to sell that fuel and close the doors. And so I called him to say, what's going on?
And this was on what day?
I believe this was the 19th.
And why do you believe it was that day?
In my journal, I've got a record that I called him on the 19th.
Oh, have I got your journal?
That was the journal we referred to with regards to accomplishments, a calendar per day before the deposition that we will be disclosing to you, and you may reserve the right to redepose them if there are questions that arise from the production of the journal.
So you have reviewed that journal before coming here today to refresh your recollection?
Yes.
How long is this journal?
It's about 80 pages.
What kind of book is it kept in?
It's in a computer database, you know, like a calendar file. Not particularly a calendar file, but it's just a computer database.
So it's in a computer is what it's in?
Yes.
What kind of format?
Lotus Notes.
Beg your pardon?
Lotus Notes.
Is it something that you continue to use today?
Yes.
It begins when and ends when?
I believe it began in the spring of 2007, and it's current as of today. My executive assistant updates it. On occasion, I do.
That's Andrea Lopez?
Yes.
Takes it, and she keeps it current in the computer?
Yes. I mean, relatively current, yes. The goal is, anytime I meet with someone, she puts in that I met with someone on that day. If there's a specific occurrence that I particularly want to make note of, I'll have her put that entry in there as well.
For the record, we became aware of the journal system yesterday. Ms. Lopez also has a journal, and we will produce hers as well.
How does Ms. Lopez know how to put into Lotus Notes the substance of your conversation with someone like Mr. Berger on the 19th of October?
I will dictate to her. I met with Joe Bag of Donuts, and we talked about the price of apples, and she'll put that in there.
It is accurate to say then, you're telling me that on the 19th you had a conversation with Mr. Berger,
Yes.
and that was instituted by you?
Yes. I believe so.
And the reason you called him was because there was this sharp reduction in the price of gas?
Well, it was multiple reasons at that time. I mean, they were past their deadline. When I spoke to him, I was not getting any confidence that a check was actually going to be provided. To the contrary, the conversations were, and I'm not talking specifically about the conversation on the 19th, because I don't remember all of it, I remember parts of it. But the conversations were, you know, as soon as we get our financing, we're going to get caught up on the rent. On the 19th in particular, I called to get a status of, are you going to pay us? And again, because of the sudden reduction in fuel cost. And in that conversation, we did specifically talk about the financing that they were trying to arrange. And in that conversation, it became clear to me that, well, I had a couple of revelations. One, the financing that had been promised since the last summer had fallen apart, and whoever that person was, they were no longer talking to. Okay, and so all of the promises that had been made up till that time about that person closing that deal, in fact, weren't true. We talked about, okay, so who are you dealing with? And the conversation was so unspecific, it gave me a lot of concern. And then he made the comment, and besides, if this deal doesn't work out, we've got a couple more in the pipeline, or something to that effect. That filled me with even greater concern, because now I felt like, okay, they're not paying us our rent. They're telling us that we're not going to get our rent paid until the financing comes through. They're not paying us our fuel flowage money. And at this point, if they don't have a deal in hand, there's no way they're ever going to meet the deadline on their lease to have the building constructed. At the same time, I think their amount due was in excess of, I don't know the number, but I think it was in excess of $40,000. And we were days away from, let me see, that was October the 1st of November, and on the 1st of November, now it's going to be up in the neighborhood of $75,000. If I go over 50,000, I got to talk to the board. Now I'm getting close to even higher than that. And so I called the board and I said, I've lost confidence. I need to tell you what's going on, and you need to give me guidance.
Up until October 19, had you been working with Luxair to try to get them in a position where they could build their building?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm not sure what you're asking me. I had been working with the city to accomplish lot ties and a sewer easement. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
Well, in fact, that is. As recently as October 13, you were briefing the board on the status of the lot tie between lot 25 and 26 and the sewer abandonment, correct?
Yes.
That's because you were actively working in the middle of October to make it so that Luxair could build its terminal.
Yes.
And you were having discussions with the folks at Luxair about getting this done so that they could be building the terminal.
Yes.
So this is after October 1, you're still having these discussions with Luxair about having them build the terminal.
Yes.
And you were encouraged that they were anxious to build the terminal.
Yes.
On October 19, what you're telling me is things changed because of this conversation that you instituted with Mr. Berger.
I wouldn't say things changed, I would say things evolved. we worked with Luxair as one of our partners from the word go. And so even though they were up and down on the amount of lateness on what they owed us, we hoped for the best, that the financing that they were trying to arrange would come together. If it came together, everybody wins. But we had to bear in mind the fact that it might not. And so we kept a very close tabs on the balance. And anytime they got excessively late, we would issue warnings, notice of default, whatever. It appeared they just did not have the funds to meet their obligation. And the more time went by, the less hope there was that they were going to get to that point.
And you say the less hope that you had that they would get to that point.
I would say
Foundation.
the less hope that we had, because I shared my thoughts and feelings with my board members.
But certainly you had less hope.
Yes.
Now, when you took over the Luxair facility, you took all their documents and financial records and stuff, didn't you?
Yes.
What did you do with those?
We stored them for them to pick up. When we evicted Luxair, prior to doing that, obviously we had discussions with our attorney on what was and was not permissible. And the bottom line is we could not use their equipment, their documents, their anything, and that we needed to safeguard it. And so when we moved in, we called a local moving company. We had everything boxed up, picked up, and stored at the moving company location for later pickup by Luxair, and we maintain that for them.
Where is it now?
At this point in time, subsequent to that, Luxair disclaimed ownership of practically everything. There it was included in that a lot of their business documents. They did not want any of those documents. Of particular concern to me, there were patient records. The storage of patient records is critical. I'm not smart on that, and so we contacted them on that as well. In the end, we said, if you don't take control of these documents by this date, and I don't remember what the date was, then we will have these documents destroyed. And ultimately, we had those documents destroyed.
With whom are you communicating all this, that you're going to have them destroyed stuff?
I don't recall. I'm going to assume it was Mr. Sean Elton.
And why Mr. Elton?
Mr. Elton was my administrative counterpart. At one point, Mr. Elton and Mr. Berger and another gentleman, I don't know his name, came to visit us and view all of their material. We took them around the airport. I think we also took them to the storage facility. They identified the items that they wanted, and the rest they told us to dispose of them however we wanted.
How was the actual eviction accomplished?
We went, I and members of my staff.
Who?
I believe I had with me Mrs. Gladys Wiggins, my airport operations director at the time, and members of her operations staff. And I don't remember who it was at that time. I think it was Craig Bloomdahl and Juan Trasvina, and I don't remember who else, and I'm not positive about those names.
Had a couple of guys with guns.
Yes.
Who are those guys?
That's what I'm saying. Those were my operations people. I believe Juan Trasvina came with us. I believe Craig Bloomdahl came with us. And we may have had the entire staff with us. I just don't remember. At that time, she had 4 people on her staff. And I would have to go back and look and see if I've got that documented who was actually with us.
So why'd you take all those people with you?
Well, when you're going to engage in an eviction, you want calm. You don't want people getting excited. In the airport, my operations people perform that function every day under a contract with TSA. And essentially, under Part 1542, there's a requirement for armed security guards. The reason you have armed security guards in the screening area is, as you, I'm sure, know, some people get excited in the screening area. They get angry for one reason or another. And so when you're in a place where people have a tendency to get excited, you want to have an armed presence, and people then tend not to get excited and stay very calm. And so using the procedures that we use in the terminal every day, it seemed like it'd be a good idea to apply those procedures to what could be a volatile situation. And in the end, when we walked in, we announced what we were doing. Everybody was very calm and very professional.
I'm showing you CL 00317. These are minutes of October 13, 2009.
Okay.
And I think on these minutes at page 2, which is CL 00318, there is a discussion of the committee reports. Let's see here. I think about the possible action to authorize the president of the Yuma County Airport Authority, correct, to sign documents for the abandonment of the sewer.
Mm-hmm.
That's a yes?
Sorry, let me look at this. Yes.
There was discussion at this meeting, was there not, about the status of Lux Air's financial relationships with the board, with the airport.
Are you saying that's in the minutes?
No, I'm not saying it's in the minutes, it's just a question. I got the
I'm
minutes
sorry.
up here because there's a discussion about Lux Air and about doing stuff. And so you, in fact, were asked by board members, what's the status of Lux Air and their payments? Weren't you?
Foundation form.
I don't recall that question. If that question was asked in a public meeting like this, I would have given a general answer. At this time, obviously, we were all very concerned about Lux Air because it's October the 13th. They made their initial payment, but it's well after the 1st. They missed their payment on the 1st. I inquired. I was told, we'll get back to you. I don't recall if Mr. Berger got back to me or not, but regardless, by the 13th, there's still no money. And so we were all concerned about it. However, this is a public meeting. I do not want to embarrass Lux Air or Mr. Berger by discussing, their finances in public. And so I would not have, if there was a specific question that had to delve into sensitive matters like that, we would have gone into executive session, and we didn't. So I'm not sure what question you're talking about.
Well, I'll tell you that Mr. Berger and Mr. Tim both recall you telling a board member who raised the question that everything was fine, everything was under control. I mean, would you say that Mr. Berger is a liar if he recalls you saying that?
Foundation form.
I do not recall that. If I could look at the more detailed notes that Andrea take, it might be in there, and that might jog my memory. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying I don't recall it.
I don't have any more detailed notes that Andrea takes. Have those something that have not been produced to me?
I'm not aware of other notes other than the calendar logbook. The logbook I'm discussing, it's more like a computer, who did you meet with each day. I'm not aware of notes from Andrea with regards to this meeting.
Well,
If we will
Sure.
look, and if we find it, we will produce it, and you'll have the opportunity to
so
ask
Mr.
questions.
Tim and Mr. Berger are going to testify that they heard you tell a board member that the financial situation with Luxair was okay as of the date of this meeting, October 13th. Do you recall anything about that?
Move to strike foundation form.
Can I answer that question?
Please go
Okay.
ahead.
I'm sorry, I do not. But I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just don't recall at this moment.
Would that have been something that you would have said in response to a board member at this opening meeting?
I
At this
don't
open meet, here, let me finish the question. Would it have been something that you would have said at this public meeting on October 13, 2006, to a board member who asked if Luxair was okay financially? You would have said something like, yeah, everything's fine, we're in good shape.
Foundation form.
I would hope not.
You would hope that you would say something instead that was like, what?
I would say something, let me get back to you on that. We're working those issues, something like that. And then if necessary, I could get with that board member and find out more specifically what he wanted.
In fact, you knew that Mr. Berger was intending to pay you all the rent, did you not?
Foundation.
I would say no. At that point, I was extremely concerned that he was not going to pay me any rent.
You told me just a moment ago that you instituted a phone call with Mr. Berger on the 19th, correct?
Yes.
Is it not true that on that phone call, you asked Mr. Berger about the payment of rent?
I'm sure I did.
Didn't he tell you on that date that they were going to pay you by the end of the month, by November 1?
Form.
I do not recall that answer. I would not be surprised if, in fact, he gave me that information.
Why, as of October 1 until October 23, had you done nothing to evict Luxair?
It's a big step, and you want to take it carefully. And before I do anything like that, I want to talk to the board and get guidance. And these things take time.
I want to show you a couple of letters that were written by you or someone at your request. First, do you know what the term time of the essence means?
It's my understanding it's a legal term.
Well, that really wasn't my question. My question was, do you know what it means?
It's my understanding it means pay attention to this. Time is of the essence. I mean, I guess the answer to your question is no.
I'm going to show you a couple of emails here, and I just want to run through these quickly, and maybe you can just confirm whether these are emails that you've seen or know something about. The first one I'm going to show you is on February 5, 2009. This is YCAA 003899.
Okay.
And this is about Well, it's from Junior to you, I guess. This Mr. Hinkle?
Yes,
How come you call him Mr. Hinkle Junior?
that's his nickname. He prefers that name.
Oh. This is an email, is it not, where you say here on page 2 that you need reports to avoid a notice of default. Were you, in fact, thinking about issuing a notice of default in February 2009 because of fuel flowage fee problems from December 2008?
Foundation form.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Well, yeah. Luxair was in default here on February 5, 2009, weren't they?
Okay.
Were they?
Without looking at a financial log, I could not tell you that.
Well, why would Mr. Hinkle on YCAA 003-900 say, I need to have the completed report and check ASAP in order to avoid a notice of default?
Form, go ahead.
He would not have said that unless they were behind on the money they owed us.
So you knew as of February that Luxair was behind.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So why didn't you issue a notice of default here?
I believe this is the one I was talking about where we had prepared a notice of default and we're in the process of delivering it when the money came in.
In February.
It was February or March. And again, like I say, Luxair is an important client for us. And so we're going to work with him as much as we can to come to an accommodation.
I'm not putting it put on screen YCAA 001088. This is Andrea Lopez to you forwarding another email that likewise says that, well, Luxair is working on obtaining financing, currently negotiating with maintenance people, working on the lot tie, and they're behind in the rent, aren't they?
Yes.
Let me show you this one. This is YCAA 001052. This is the Luxair weekly update from Andrea Lopez to you. And in this particular situation, in early March, we have Luxair still behind, aren't they?
Yes.
And yet if I go to page 3 of this, we find here that someone is you've received February rent, you got January fuel flow, waiting on their lease rent for March. I guess you're letting them pay late, weren't you?
As a landlord, you have all kinds of tenants. Sometimes you have what we refer to as a late payer, a chronically late payer. They pay at the last minute. When that tenant is a very small tenant, like a T-shade, you hate it, but they're good people, you work with them. In this case, Luxair was proving themselves to be late payers. And so the question then becomes, is there a deeper underlying issue here, or is this a chronically late payer? And and there's no way to figure that out except over time. And so in our case, over time, the balance kept getting bigger. And that's, as over time, we started being concerned, is this does not appear to be a chronic late payer. This appears to be a basic fault in their business plan, a basic fault in their management system. There's a real issue here. At that point in time, the airport authority has to, again, consider it and say, what's the risk to the airport? Financially, what if they never pay? Well, at some point, there's going to be a cutoff. At some point, you're going to get to a dollar amount, and you're going to say, this far and no further. At some point, you're going to get to another obstacle. Their facility had to be built by, I believe it was February of 2010, or they were automatically in material breach of their lease, and the problem was going to go away anyway. And so one of the issues that we struggled with is, particularly after the October 19th call, is it sounds like their whole thing is just falling apart, and nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change. No one, I mean, there's no promise of payment that you can rely on. We'd had so many promises of payment. I promise you, you're going to have the money next week, and it never happened. And so we had reached the point where we could not count on that promise at all. And then when it sounded like the deal fell apart, now you're looking at, okay, if we don't terminate this thing, we're going to get to the point where the airport is at risk. Because how much of this debt can you allow to accumulate, especially if you get to the point where you're not going to be paid back? And then beyond that, I'm now concerned that because of other issues just that you hear about anecdotally concerning Luxair, it's conceivable they may shut down without warning. There's no way I can afford to take that risk.
I think that you missed my question here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And so let me restate my question, because you answered something that I don't know, you're just kind of blathering on about something I didn't ask. So listen to my question. Okay. And answer my question. As of March 2009, you were letting Luxair pay late.
For move to strike. Go ahead.
I would say that's not true. If I were allowing them to pay late, I wouldn't be taking action against them to try to get them to pay and get caught up. And we continue to do that throughout our relationship.
In fact, there was never 1 month where Luxair was ever fully paid up.
That's correct.
And you always allowed them to kind of be late. And by that I mean you didn't send out a notice of default and require them to strictly comply.
Foundation?
We did send out notices of default. We did everything we could to get them paid up because we wanted them to succeed. You're right, eventually we gave up on that.
Now, let's try another one here. This is YCAA 000614. This is another weekly update by Andrea Lopez to the Board of Directors. And it's showing here on page 2, I guess. Let's see, maybe here. This is about the financial status of Luxair. March 2, the airport received February's rent, and January's fuel flow. We're waiting on their lease deposit of $13,000 and their rent for March. Do you see that?
Yes.
So as of this period of time, what you were doing was you're saying, well, okay, we'll accept their rent and they're paying late by a month or so. Is that kind of what we're letting them do?
Foundation form.
I would say no. I'm identifying the fact that they are late.
Well, but the point of the matter is, you're accepting payments in arrears. March 2, you got February's rent and January's fuel flow. You're waiting for their rent for March and their lease deposit. You weren't kicking them out.
That's true.
Now, if I go to March 17, you get Mr. Hinkle telling you that they owe you $32,800, Luxair, correct?
Yes. And
you go, well, it's okay. You're not kicking them out. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct at all.
Well, it's not okay, but you're not kicking them out.
That's true.
You want them to pay, as every landlord would.
Yes.
But you're not insisting that they pay, even though they are 61 days late on their lease deposit and half a month late on their March 2009 rent, and haven't even given you the fuel flowage fees for February.
Foundation form.
Correct?
Yes, and that kind of underscores what I was saying earlier, is because they're an important client, you're going to work with them a certain period of time to try to put the deal together.
Okay, so in March, you're working with them.
Yes.
Here we've got another email. This is March 25, 2009, and I'm interested in showing you this paragraph here. I'll blow that up for you. This is on YCAA 0000611. Luxair is still delinquent $32,000. And I think this is where you say that there are, you're meeting with the attorney to prepare a notice of default. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it says here, the reason Mr. Williams met with the attorney on Tuesday was to prepare default notifications. Is that what that means, appropriate notifications?
Yes.
Mr. Williams has spoken with Luxair about this in detail. And what's the antecedent of this?
I'm assuming you're talking about the financial thing you're displaying above.
Well, I'm wondering, since they're not my minutes, and you approved these, right?
Yes, these aren't minutes. This is a update.
Well, it says Mr. Williams met with your attorney and spoken with Luxair about this. What is the this?
The financial situation.
And impressed upon them the seriousness of the situation.
Yes.
And what did you say to impress upon them the seriousness of the situation?
I don't recall the exact conversation, but I'm sure it was to let them know that we're going to be preparing a notice of default.
On March 26th, 2006, there's email correspondence between you and your lawyers. Can you tell me what the subject of this email correspondence was? Not anything that was said, just the subject.
Don't answer that. It's privileged communication.
Well, I just want to know the subject of it.
No, that's still privileged.
Was this about the notice of default you wanted prepared?
Don't answer that.
Well, the day before, you had talked with the attorneys. Was the attorneys you talked to Byrne, Benish, Garcia, and Valerie, however you say that? How do you say that name? Villarreal? How do you say that?
Villarreal.
Villarreal. Are those the attorneys that you met with?
You may answer.
On the document we had just a minute ago?
Yes.
Yes.
This now is March 30. This is a two-page draft of something. Looks like a default letter to me. Is this the one that you say was not sent out because they came in and paid the rent?
Yes, that's my belief.
In this particular letter, YCAA 001393 and YCAA 001394, there is a paragraph on the first page that says, time is of the essence is hereby reinstated. Do you know what that means?
No. Well, I didn't at that time. I do now.
Oh, what does it mean now to your understanding?
Well, I kind of do now. It's my understanding that that is a legal term that means it's more important. I guess I don't understand precisely what it means, but it means that the timing is important.
I noticed in your September 2009 notice of default, there is no phrase in there that says time is of the essence, is hereby reinstated. Why?
I couldn't tell you that.
But portions of that September letter were written by your lawyers for you to add whatever you added.
Yes.
Let me show you. Nah, let's skip that. Let's go to this one. This is YCAA 003897. This is Mr. Hinkle's email to you now in April saying, well, they're late again. What? Well, they've actually overpaid their rent, but they haven't paid their deposit.
Foundation form.
What's your question?
Your question is, was Luxair still behind on its financial obligations to the airport here on April 2, 2009?
Yes.
So what did you do about that?
We continued to push for money.
But you had allowed them in the past to pay partial payments and then push for the balance as an ongoing matter. Is that correct?
Well, I would say
It's kind of a yes and no. I'm trying to get through with you by noon.
Okay.
You had, prior to April 2, 2009, allowed Luxair to pay part of their arrearage and then hope to get the rest later, correct?
We accepted partial payments and continued to push for full payment.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
So prior to April 2, 2009, even though Luxair was behind, you accepted partial payments trying to get them to pay themselves current.
Yes.
But they never paid themselves current.
No.
They never, that is correct, they never paid themselves current then. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Now here is April 7, 2009. This is another Andrea Lopez. Looks like the weekly Luxair update. Why were there weekly updates?
The airport board was concerned about the status of Luxair. They had assumed a new burden with I believe this is subsequent to the purchase of Betco. In doing that, they had assumed new obligations with regard to removing industrial waste on the airport. They had established a history of late payments, and so the board wanted us to track them very closely and give them weekly and then later periodic updates on their status.
Something has been forwarded by Andrea Lopez to you, and it says, Craig, could you also be more specific as to the progress made by Luxair for funding? From whom is that forwarded email?
I could not tell you without digging into the computer system. It appears this is a response from a board member to Andrea which she then forwarded to me to investigate.
There is a note as a part of this email that says it may be protected by the attorney-client privilege and attorney work product doctrine. So I sort of presume this came from a lawyer.
You're right, I hadn't noticed that.
Is there a lawyer on the board?
No. Well, with seeing that, it makes me think that was from Mr. Benish.
Let me now
Oh, wait a
show
minute.
you
Waldo.
YCAA 003724. This is another update from, I guess, Junior to you this time, saying that Luxair is still behind, correct?
Yes.
And then if we go to this one, this is April 23, YCAA 001682. This is Gabby Reyes, email Junior Hinkle.
Sorry.
And you can do that again, you know. Mr. Koash likes that.
My apologies. I didn't think. Yeah, I will.
Okay. I'm now placed on the screen YCAA 001682. That's Gabby Reyes giving Mr. Hinkle an update on, well, no check from Luxair. So now again at the end of April, Luxair is behind in their rent, correct?
Yes.
It's accurate to say, is it not, that you were in pretty much constant contact with someone at Luxair about the fact that they're behind on their rent. That's correct?
Yes.
And was that maybe Mr. Berger with whom you were speaking?
At this point in time, most often it was Sean Elston.
So if I take from April 23 now and go to April 27, I get another weekly update and financial status going to the board. And here we see that Luxair is late on their March payment, and it's now, well, still April. They don't have their performance bond. Did you really care about that performance bond?
We did care about it, but we, through a variety of reasons, we finally dropped the requirement for the performance bond, and we no longer have that as a requirement.
Well, did you ever drop that requirements from Luxair?
I don't recall the answer to that. I think we finally dropped the requirement, but I'm not sure.
You just told someone you don't need to bother with that
I don't recall, but I think so,
at Luxair.
at Luxair.
Let's go.
I'm just not sure.
Let's go to May 27. This is another Luxair update from Mr. Hinkle to you, saying they still owe rent, still owe fuel flowage, and still haven't paid the deposit. At this time, end of May 2009, you're still working with getting Luxair to be current.
Yes.
This email, YCAA 003920, is from Mr. Hinkle directly to Mr. Berger. When was it that Mr. Hinkle would be writing to Mr. Berger or someone at Luxair as opposed to you?
As you see, it's about a insurance certificate, and Mr. Hinkle handles those issues with all of our tenants. Mr. Hinkle and his staff.
This particular email, however, also says, FYI, we haven't received the May report, April fuel flowage fees, and you're behind in rent. Is this something Mr. Hinkle should have been sending out?
He and I work very closely together, and an instance like this where you have an ongoing issue and he's given them an update, I would not have any problems with that. He initiated the email, obviously, for insurance certificate, and brought up the back rent issue at the same time. In the normal course of events, his staff handles collections
Collections on what?
on monies due us from tenants and other people.
Like rent?
Yes.
So his staff would be some people that I should be talking to about what they have done to try to get rent from Luxair?
No, that's not what I said. I said in the normal course of events, his staff will handle collections, and so I can see that's why he would send that. On something the size of Luxair, I'm going to be more involved in that.
On this same day, I think, Mr. Hinkle sends you an email letting you know how much Luxair is behind, and this is YCAA 003210, correct?
Yes.
Let me now show you this letter. This is CL 00005. Do you recognize this letter? Also CL 00006.
Yes.
What is it?
This is another notice of default.
And this is the first notice, is it not, that actually has been delivered to Mr. Berger or anyone at Luxair?
Yes, I believe that's true.
What was the purpose of this?
To let them know that in their default on their lease and they need to get current.
I noticed that this particular letter doesn't reinstate time of the essence either. Why is that?
I don't know the answer to that.
But what it does say that in the event Luxair fails to fully comply with this money demand for $19,000, the airport authority will hold Luxair a material breach on all four leases, correct?
Yes.
What did you think this meant? When you got a copy of this letter, didn't you?
Yes.
In fact, you're the one who instructed Mr. Benish to send out this letter, are you not?
Yes.
What did you expect to accomplish by this?
I expected that Luxair would get current on their rent.
But they didn't, did they?
I don't recall the particulars after this. I suspect we got some money from them, but not current.
So why did you send out a notice of default and then do nothing?
I suspect because we got partial payment. And so, again, as long as there's hope that we're going to eventually get to the end, then you want to work with your client as best you can. When you've lost hope, then there's no sense in moving on.
This email is dated June 12. And it is Mr. Sean Elton to various people. But I'm interested in the one from Mr. Berger here at the bottom. The one to Mr. Berger at the bottom by Sean Elton. When he says here that there is this small contingent, a minor contingent on the board up in arms, would you have any idea, as you sit here today, why Mr. Elton would say something like there's a minor contingent of people on the board who are up in arms?
I'm sure I told Mr. Elton, as I said, the board was requiring me to give them updates. There were a few board members who were very dissatisfied with the performance of Luxair.
And who were those people?
I honestly do not know. I don't recall.
Those people on the board at the time that you evicted Luxair.
Yes, they must have been. This is dated 2009, so they must have been.
Of those people who are still on the board, how many were, as so to speak, up in arms about Luxair?
Inform, go ahead.
I would say 3 or 4. It could have been 4 or 5.
How many in total are there?
14.
Who is Sharon Merz? M-E-R-Z?
That name is not familiar to me. Where does it say that?
I just
Mr. Williams is just asking.
asking.
Oh.
Do you know who Kathleen Hoffman is?
I believe that's Mr. Berger's mom.
Do you know her?
I've met her.
Let me show you this particular email, if I may. This is YCAA002992. Who is John Matthias?
I believe he is a employee of Pancrasi Real Estate.
You tell him here that those are 2 lots currently owned by the airport. We are tying to the rest of the airport's property. Why were you tying them to the rest of the airport's property?
The GA Terminal FBO facility that Luxair was going to build were going to be built on, I believe, lots 25 and 26, which the airport owned, but they were platted separately from the main airport. And the facility that Luxair was going to build was going to cross the plat boundary of 25 and 26 and the plat boundary of the airport. And those lots had to be tied all together into a single lot to meet the city's building code requirements.
So, did you continue with this lot tie arrangement?
Yes.
Is it now tied?
Yes.
Is the sewer abandoned?
No. When we evicted Luxair, we were in the final stages of the lot tie, and if anyone ever develops that, it's going to have to be tied together. We had already put the money into it, so we went ahead and did it. The sewer abandonment, however, was specifically related to the facility of Luxair. There was no sense in continuing with that, and so we dropped that.
Let me show you this. This is CL00121. In this particular email, in the portion that I've boxed here at the top, Mr. Berger is complaining about the nature of the phone call that he had with you on the 19th. I want you to read that paragraph that I have boxed. It's the first paragraph.
Okay. Okay.
Is there anything in that particular email that was sent to you on October 24 that is not true?
Warren, go ahead. Yes.
Tell me what is not true.
The comment, payment was offered on Friday and you refused it. Why? Payment was never offered to me.
Is there anything else in this first paragraph on page CL00121 that is untrue?
Warren.
The comment where he says, you never once in the call said that payment delivered before the end of October would be unacceptable to the airport. I never implied that it was acceptable.
Well,
And so,
so what are you telling me? That Mr. Berger was not telling the truth when he says that you never once in the call said that payment delivered before the end of October would be unacceptable? Did you say anything like that?
Foundation form.
I do not recall any comment like that in any way.
Well, he says you didn't make a comment like that, so there wouldn't be anything to recall.
Foundation form, go ahead and answer.
Yes, and so as I read that sentence, I cannot say that sentence is untrue.
Okay. In any event, you did receive this email, did you not?
Yes.
Did you respond to this email?
As I recall, I did not. As I recall, I forwarded it to my attorney and asked him to take over.
It also says in here, and this is of interest to me as well, that CareFlight employees are operating in our building telling customers that we went out of business and they are using our equipment. Is that true or not?
CareFlight employees were operating in the airport's building. We asked those employees not to speculate. I don't know what they were saying. They were not using their equipment because we gathered all of their equipment and stored it. And
how are they fueling the regional jets then?
CareFlight, I don't know the exact details. CareFlight had refueling trucks. I don't know if they were using their own refueling trucks for that, or if they were using refueling trucks that were being leased previously to Luxair and now to CareFlight. I don't know the specifics. CareFlight had some of their own fuel trucks, so I'm assuming they were using those.
Going back to a statement that you made, that you don't recall being told on Friday, October 23, that Luxair was prepared to pay you in full. I think you said that, correct?
That is
For
true.
Foundation.
No one offered me payment on Friday.
If at noon on October 23, 2009, and Mr. Berger had walked into your office with a check that brought the airport completely full, would you have taken it?
At that point in time, I would have called my attorney. I would have told him payment was being presented. It is my understanding he would have told me accept the payment.
How do you have the understanding of what your lawyer would have told you if at noon on October 23, someone had given you payment in full?
We discussed the possibility that when we went in to evict, payment would be offered. We discussed this very specifically, and we were told very specifically, if payment is offered, accept it. But payment was never offered.
Have you continued to get monthly fuel reports from both CareFlight and Millionaire since you have evicted Luxair?
We have gotten monthly fuel reports. We got them from CareFlight up until the time they ceased refueling operations.
looking at this particular email on the screen, CL00121, do you recall anyone ever responding to Mr. Tim Berger about what was going on at the airport on Saturday, October 24, 2009?
Form.
It's my understanding within during this time period, we did have a conversation with Lux Air. I don't recall if Tim Berger was involved. We scheduled a conference call and with several participants. And I don't recall if Mr. Berger was in that conference call.
Would you read the question and the answer back, please?
Looking at this particular email on the screen, CL00121, do you recall anyone ever responding to Mr. Tim Berger about what was going on at the airport on Saturday, October 24, 2009? Answer, it's my understanding during this time period, we did have a conversation with Lux Air. I don't recall if Tim Berger was involved. We scheduled a conference call and with several participants, and I don't recall if Mr. Berger was in that conference call.
Were you part of the we that had this conference call?
Yes.
And what was the subject of that conference call?
The events on Friday.
Was there anything in there about anybody wanting to pay you rent?
No, there was not.
So as far as you knew, no one was even offering to pay rent after you had evicted them.
Yes, that's correct.
Let me show you this letter. This is CL00287. This looks like Mr. Benish's letter to Mr. Berger that says, well, you can read it. I've got CL00287 and CL00288. Is this letter dated October 27, 2009, CL00287 and CL00288, the response that was given to Mr. Berger's Saturday, October 24 email to you?
Yes. Going back to your previous question, I don't recall if I responded to Mr. Berger's email myself or not.
Let me now show you YCAA 000152. Would you please tell me what this is?
That's a press release that was prepared talking about CareFlight.
It's talking about Lux Air ceasing the operation of business, correct?
There's no mention of Lux Air in this email that I see.
Well, it's not
there
an
it
email,
is.
it's
Yeah,
a press
I'm sorry.
release.
I'm
Airport
sorry.
press release.
Yeah.
Effective October 23, Lux Air ceased to provide fixed base operator services.
Yeah.
That's not true, is it?
I would say yes, it is true.
Who's Gen or Jen
Jen Gross
Gross?
is Her title is corporate account manager, and essentially she's my PR person, PR marketing, and account manager for clients.
The reality is Luxair didn't cease, they were stopped, correct?
That's true.
It says the airport has coordinated with CareFlight to assume the responsibility. In fact, Joe Gamez was right there right away. I mean, within the hour, taking over the operation, wasn't he?
That's true.
And he was out pumping gas that was in the ground that belonged to Luxair, wasn't he?
Foundation form.
I don't believe that's true initially. I believe initially he only pumped fuel from his tanks.
But he did ultimately pump gas from
He did
Lux's
ultimately pump gas from the underground tanks that had been previously leased by Luxair.
As of this date, October 28, 2009, the airport had decided they weren't going to do a general aviation terminal, correct?
Foundation.
No, that's not correct at all.
But it says, the airport will start renovating the former Betco building into a public general aviation terminal in the very near future, explained Jen Gross.
Yes,
That's on YCAA 000152, correct?
yes,
Says you're going to start the transformation immediately, correct?
yes. Maybe I misunderstood your question. I thought you said that we had not decided to.
No, well, you had decided to abandon the idea of a general aviation terminal as of October 28, had you not?
Foundation form.
No, it says right here, we were going to renovate the Betco building into a public J terminal.
Okay, so you had abandoned the idea of the general aviation terminal that you had wanted Luxair to build, correct?
Yes.
Who authorized this press release to go out?
Me.
Did you approve all the language in YCAA 000152 before it went out?
Yes.
Let me show you this particular document. This is CL 00227. Luxair no longer operating at the building. Did you read this?
Form. Go ahead.
I don't know.
I've got a question here. It says, the airport just lost a big chunk of revenue with the loss, said Craig Williams, the airport manager. Did you say something like that to Joyce Lobeck, the Sun staff writer for the Yuma paper?
I must have. I don't recall specific comments.
It also says in here that you said, to fill the void, CareFlight Aviation is now the airport's primary fuel provider, correct?
Yes.
That had been prearranged that CareFlight would come in and take over the Luxair operation before you and the armed guards walked in and threw out the people, correct?
Yes.
How long before?
It had happened on the 21st, to the best of my recollection.
So from the 21st onward, Mr. Gamez knew that he was coming in to take over the operation of Luxair. Is that correct?
He knew that was the plan, yes.
It says here at the bottom, and I'm going to try to put this so that you can see the runover of this newspaper article on CL 00228. It says, we are very grateful to Joe Gamez, the local CareFlight station manager, for the way he stepped up to the plate. What was there about Mr. Gamez that required him to do something extraordinary to kind of step up to the plate?
With the departure of Luxair, Mr. Gamez became the only fuel provider on the airport. At that time, as I recall, he had about a 20% market share of the airport's fuel. It may have been 30, I don't remember. And so overnight, he was required to plus up to about 4 or 5 times his previous size to include picking up refueling for the airlines.
So that's something that you had him doing before you actually came in and threw Luxair out of the property on the 23rd, correct?
Well, we met with Mr. Gomez. We informed him that it was likely that we were going to evict Luxair on Friday. Before we did that, before we could proceed, I needed assurance from him that he would be able to provide fueling for the airlines. That was the most critical requirement. And then staff the fuel desk in the Betco building. He convinced us that he could meet that requirement, and so we moved forward. I told him the catch was, I had him sign a NDA. I said, you cannot tell anybody about this because it's not a fact at this point in time. And so what I need you to tell me that you can have the people on hand if and when this happens, and the equipment in place, and that you're authorized to pump airline fuel. And he provided me with those assurances. And so we said, we will call you if this goes through. It could be that, you know, when we walk in, they pay us, the whole deal's off. You got to forget about it. You signed an NDA. And so we had him on standby because...
And by NDA, you mean non-disclosure agreement?
Non-disclosure agreement.
Here on the second page of this newspaper article, it says CL00228, Williams said creating the terminal was made possible through a change in the airport's charges to FBOs undertaken with Lux's departures.
Yes.
What was that change?
The change was that we were going to stop collecting rent on airport ramp from FBOs. Instead, we were going to increase the fuel flowage fee up to 22 cents.
It also says in this particular document that the new fee will counter the loss of Luxair as a tenant, freeing up the airport to take over the space and create the terminal. Is that correct?
Yes.
How long had the airport been planning on taking over the Luxair building and converting it to a terminal?
Since October the 20th at the strategy committee meeting.
Now looking at this last comment in this newspaper article on CL00228, it said, well, is that an accurate quote of what you said? Luxair had a big chunk of the airport. They were an important source of revenue. Last Friday, they ceased operation, and the airport governing board realized it would have to establish a new model to benefit everyone.
Yes.
Is it accurate to say then that you knew that the model under which Luxair was operating was something that wouldn't work?
I'm not sure what your question is. We knew once the eviction was complete, we suspected, and Mr. Gomez confirmed, he was not interested in leasing the ramp formerly leased by Luxair. That meant that we lost all that revenue. And so we then had to come up with a new model, which we did that weekend.
Okay, I want to take a 5-minute break, and then I think I'm through with you, Mr. Williams, but I want to just check with people who are smarter than I am to see if I really am. So we'll be 5 minutes.
We have one or two questions.
We are off the record. The time on the video monitor is 12:07 PM. We are on the record. The time on the video monitor is 12:08.
No more questions.
Mr. Williams, I just have a couple of questions for you. You previously testified, I believe, that Luxair in October had dropped the price of fuel by 50 cents a gallon. Is that
Yes.
correct? And I believe you testified that that alarmed you. Is that
Yes.
correct? Why did that alarm you?
They had never done anything like that before. With that report, I had also been told they had just received a full load of fuel. I was aware of their financial difficulties at our airport and at other airports, and what I'd read in the media, and was concerned that in the overall scheme of Luxair's issues, that we might be dropped.
And by dropped, what do you mean by that?
That they might just suddenly close the doors without advance notice. In which case, I would have airlines landing with passengers and trying to take off, and not not have anyone there to service them.
And did you ever agree with Mr. Berger to extend the deadline for payment from October 1, 2009 to the end of October
No.
at any time?
I never did, no.
Nothing further?
We're done.
We are off the record. The time on the video monitor is 12:10 PM. This concludes this too, and this concludes the deposition.